is Maximiliane Jousse, and the talk she will be giving is the Drõa plot, bringing BFDP research to or science to the people.
Yes, sorry, let me just try and share my screen. I also can't pronounce it, so it's okay.
Wonderful. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Oh, what's going on? Okay. There we go. Sorry. And then, all right. Is it all good?
Excellent.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Maximiliane Jousse, and I'm a PhD student at McGill University. And today I'll be presenting the Bacurú Drõa forest plot, a project led by Dr. Catherine Potvin. My role in this project was to analyze the first data from this plot, and so I'll be mainly presenting that aspect of the bigger project. So this project places itself in the context of Forest Geo, a global network of forest research sites started by the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. This network of plots allows us to study forest dynamics and responses to climate change, and all the data across the network use the same methodologies so that we can have comparative studies. In Panama, there are around 50 forest plots, although not all of them are Forest Geo, but these include the famous 50-hectare Barro Colorado Island plot, also known as BFDP or Barro Colorado Island Forest Dynamics plot. BFDP is a Forest Geo plot. And so most plots in Panama, however, are located around the Panama Canal watershed, except for three, with the arrows. And there's a lack of plots in remote areas, in intact forests, and within indigenous territory across Panama and across the wider Forest Geo network. So the Bacurú Drõa project aims to address these three shortfalls. Fun fact, Bacurú Drõa means old trees in Imbera and was named after the abundance of very large trees found in the area. And so located in an intact part of the Darien forest at the border between Panama and Colombia, the Bacurú Drõa plot is a 10-hectare plot in the Imbera territory of the Tierras Colectivas de Rio Balsas, sorry for my pronunciation, near the Imbera village of Manene. So this forest is part of the larger Choco-Darien ecoregion, one of the most biodiverse and threatened regions in the world. The Darien forest in particular is also one of the most botanically understudied regions in the world, because it is remote, hard to access, and dangerous due to guerrilla and narcotraficante activity. Furthermore, it's currently at the epicenter of a massive migrant crisis, as it's the only point of crossing between South and Central America. So this project originally started as a way to investigate forest responses to climate change, but through the lens of participation, action, research, it evolved into a four-part framework, which aimed to enable indigenous rights, promote economical development, support traditional knowledge, and advance scientific knowledge. Participation action research methodology is centered around the active participation of community members and researchers in decision-making, action, and developing critical consciousness for co-constructing knowledge. So before I embark on the details of this project, I want to highlight some key actors. So this project was initiated and led by Dr. Catherine Potvin, who is deeply respected in the region and has worked closely with the local and traditional authorities to create this project. As she enters her retirement, the project is now led by a research consortium of sorts, led by Dr. Potvin, Dr. Juan Carlos Villarreal, Dr. Daisy Dent, and Dr. Joseph Leviton. Alexis Ortega and Zoilo Bailarin, both from the region and Imbera themselves, are essential to the project as scientific coordinator and financial coordinator, respectively. So back to the framework. An essential aim of this project is to support the transmission of Imbera taxonomy and compile information on Imbera history to empower indigenous science. So recognizing the importance of indigenous names is a crucial step in decolonizing science. Therefore, along with binomial nomenclature, every censused individual in the 10-hectare plot is identified to its Imbera name. 4 traditional knowledge holders, designated by the traditional authorities, went to survey the plots, and they independently all surveyed the same subplot, such as to standardize the taxonomy across the knowledge holders. And they then went and identified all trees with stems bigger than 10 centimeters at diameter at breast height, with Imbera names. and they were accompanied by 4 youth to encourage the transmission of knowledge to the younger generation. The local Embera people live in the forest and have many uses for it, such as construction, hunting, food, household uses, and cultural uses. So here we see a palm is used for the construction of traditional houses. So we also asked Alexis Ortega to select species of cultural importance, for which we sampled saplings as well as bigger adults. We'll take a break. So the Bacurú Drõa plot gives us a way to document the diversity of the Darien forest and to provide an intact forest baseline in the face of climate change. In particular, my project looked to address the following questions using data from the plot. So first, what are the characteristic elements of the Darien forest? How does this plot compare to other plots in Panama in terms of composition and conservation status? And finally, what can the Bacurú Drõa plot tell us about Embera management of the forest? To address these questions, I used data collected from the Bacurú Drõa plot and compared it to the latest census data from other forest plots in Panama. I thus have diameter, identity, and conservation status for each stem with a diameter at breast height of 10 centimeters or more across 53 plots, which is a total of 119 hectares of forest. These plots were grouped into 6 geographical groups, seen here as Bacurú Drõa, BFDP, Alto Chagres, San Lorenzo, and Pacific. The groups were made based on environmental variables and locations, as well as, and they are color-coded across figures, just for ease. So on a per hectare basis, stem density varied widely between plots and groups of plots, with Bacurú Drõa having the second lowest mean number of stems. However, when you look at density of species, or species per stem per hectare, on the y-axis here, across geogroups, we see that Bacurú Drõa has the highest density of species per stem, and that Alto Chagres has the most variance in species per stem across its plots. To further look at tree diversity, we calculated Fish's alpha, an indicator of alpha diversity that considers total abundance as well as total species number and is relatively insensitive to sample size. This shows that Bacurú Drõa had the highest tree diversity, closely followed by Alto Chagres, which, like the previous figure, had some very diverse plot and some less diverse plots. A non-metric multidimensional analysis, or NMDS, was performed on tree species abundances to look at species compositions across groups. An NMDS maximizes dissimilarity across the whole dataset. So points in multidimensional space here represent plots. The further the plots are, the more dissimilar the composition of these plots. This highlights the distinctiveness of the Bacurú Drõa tree assemblage that stands out in its own in the three-dimensional space. Not surprisingly, 1 hectare subplots are clustered together, both for Bacurú Drõa and the BFDP 50 hectare plots, which are groups by themselves, while individual 1 hectare plots are more scattered through multidimensional space. We further look at group composition using this octave plot, which bins the number of individuals per species on a geometric series. In lighter morphospecies and in darker named species. We see that both Alto Chagres and Bacurú Drõa are characterized by a high number of singletons, although Bacurú Drõa is twice the size of the Alto Chagres group. The BFDP plot has a unique shape, which is characteristic of larger forest plots. And this figure also highlights the large number of morphospecies found in the Bacurú Drõa plot, undeniably a product of a difficulty in obtaining specimens, but also of our lack of knowledge of the flora in the Darien. So we next look at conservation value of the different groups. We first consider an aggregate IUCN conservation status of each plot. So we assign a score to each status and then take the community weighted mean of each hectare in each group. This figure shows that the Bacurú Drõa group has the highest mean IUCN score, although we see a few high-valued plots in Gamboa, Pacific, and San Lorenzo groups, driven by the presence of Dalbergia retusa, which is the only critically endangered tree in this dataset. We also look at community-weighted means of global range as a measure of rarity and thus conservation value. We see again that the forest at Bacurú Drõa has the lowest mean range, indicating it harbors individuals with low range that are therefore either rare or endemic, or endemic. Although, as before, we see that Gamboa and Pacific have a couple of plots with very low mean ranges. So conservation value is not only measured in rarity, but also in ecosystem function. Here we contrast the cultural score of selected species with their IUCN status. These species were chosen and scored by cultural use by science coordinator Alexis Ortega from 1, low importance, to 3, high importance. So this figure shows us two things: that species of high use are not deemed endangered by the IUCN, and likewise that IUCN status does not reflect the use value of tree species on which the Embera rely on to live with the forest. So a core aspect of this project is also to support Indigenous rights. Though they live off the land, only 1.2% of their territory is used for agriculture and can be detected as disturbed through remote sensing. This project confirms this and demonstrates that they are good stewards of their natural legacy, which provides strong support for land titling cases, i.e., they are looking to obtain ownership over their land. Finally, a key part of the project's framework is promoting economical development by providing legitimate job opportunities and opening new options to youth and women. The Bacurú Drõa project does this 2 ways. So first, we provide workshops and training options in various disciplines, such as how to use computers, how to use Excel, working with GIS, but also forming field technicians, funding drone licenses, or even funding external workshops, such as this one given by Wapikoni, an Indigenous-led Canadian-based non-profit organization on filming. The second way is providing legal job avenues in a place where the main option for revenue is illegal. We employ people as technicians and management, but also pay for the food and lodging when visiting the field and food for the technicians. Pictured here is Doralicia Valdespino, who is head field technician and first woman to join the technicians in 2014. In 2023, this project gave employment to 52 men and 82 women. So, in conclusion, this plot lets us characterize the unique aspects of the Darien forest as few have done before, and is a valuable contribution to the existing network of plots in Panama and in Forest Geo. My study has shown that the Darien has a high tree diversity, many singletons, many morpho species, and a different dominant flora to other plots in Panama. Furthermore, the Bacurú Drõa plot specifically has a high conservation value and a different community composition to other plots. Finally, the Bacurú Drõa plot is a valuable example of a bicultural research framework that helps us improve our understanding and management of tropical forests. So in conclusion, this study shows us the importance of studying various forests in Panama and globally, especially intact forests located in Indigenous peoples' lands. Oop, sorry. Yeah, we will be publishing an article from which the data presented here comes from. It's currently in review at Conservation Science and Practice, but I would like to thank all my co-authors, the technicians, and thank you all for listening. And I believe I was a little fast.
Thank you so much, Maximilian. You're right on time. It's perfect. Great. So we have questions in the chat, and please continue to add questions here as we have a couple of minutes for discussion before we take a small break. So we'll start off with questions for Sally in the chat. There was multiple people that asked about effective population size and local adaptation, and probably the intersection of that with thoughts about assisted gene flow that you had at the beginning of your talk. Could you share your thoughts?
Yeah. So the basic principle goes back to population genetics, and so it's you don't expect local adaptation to develop if the selection coefficient is less than 1/2 NE, where NE is the effective population size. So I put a couple of references there, but interestingly, there was a paper by Willie, I can't remember her first name, has published a few papers on this and did find in an empirical analysis that rare species were less likely to show up as locally adapted in common gardens. And so if we don't have local adaptation to climate, assisted gene flow wouldn't actually be assisted gene flow. It could be genetic rescue. The two become equal at that point. And so if you have populations that are, have so little genetic diversity, very low effective population size, they still might benefit from translocations in. But because drift is strong in small populations, you really want to be careful if those populations have been isolated for a long time, because they could be fairly different. You could have more maladaptive alleles. So it really requires testing those things. And I think you don't want to start with the assumption that a rare species is locally adapted. You want to test that before you make transfers. So it's very different from the situation we have with trees, where we've got large effective population sizes. But the other thing I would say, where effective population size becomes really important, is thinking about if you're doing anytime we're doing translocations, we want to be careful about the magnitude, the number of individuals we're introducing as a proportion of the population. And Nick touched on this. And we don't want, and we also want to be careful that we're not decreasing the effective population size of the recipient population. So there's something called the Ryman-Laker effect, where you can actually reduce variation by introducing a bunch of individuals that have a lower effective population size, like relatively few parents contributing to a lot of seed. You put that seed into another population, you can actually reduce the effective population size of that recipient population. This is something I think people don't think about. So these are all sort of things we need to think about with individual species.
Thank you. It's a wonderful answer. Okay, our second question is for Maria over here. And this is a comment on Dr. Rayner's talk yesterday. She says, Dr. Rayner's talk on phenotypic shift showed interesting temperature-driven effects on early bud growth and leaf shed in some European trees. It might be useful to compare these trees adapted to tropical dry forests such as yours. Have you thought about this at all? Nope. We have Maria on here still? Yes, we do. Are you around, Maria?
Hello, I'm sorry. I think it's that we can compare these tropical forests, such as specifically the seasonal dry forests, as I show the Caatinga, that show a marked seasonality, and the temperature driving the transition dates of these species. I think is a good comparison. Okay.
Thank you. We have a bunch of different other requests for different references and for connections in the chat. So speakers, if you have not looked there yet, I would suggest you look there so you can provide some references and some talks here. Other questions that we have in the chat. If anybody else has any other questions in the chat, put them on in. I don't think I missed any in here. My question for you, Maximiliane, is have the surveys that you have been doing, has it uncovered any new species in there? Is this something that's been valuable for the discovery of new biodiversity?
So the answer is kind of, because describing a new species is really long, and you need to get a bunch of different specimens, so like flowers and fruit. So there's a couple of potentially new species that people are working on describing, but a lot of it is also just species that we don't either see in Panama, so that's why we don't really know what they are, or species that are just not observed very commonly. So maybe, but we'll have to wait on the decision of botanists.
Wonderful. More roles for botanists in the future world here. That's great. All right. So I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Let's take about a 10-minute break, and we will come back for the next session.